Hi, this is Rupert G from the Hello Deli, and you're currently watching the Letterman Podcast.
La, la, la. Welcome to the Letterman Podcast. My name is Mike Chisholm. I am going to shoot this intro right now just as my guest has left the building. The guest of this show, Lee Ellenberg, was a writer for The Late Show with David Letterman from 2000 to 2015. His relationship with the show, however, began 6 years sooner. Started in 94 as a page for The Late Show and went all the way to the end of the run. Right now, he is a writer for The Tonight Show. Can you think of more of a fairy tale for somebody who wanted to be a comedy writer? Imagine if he didn't want to be a comedy writer and that was his life. I mean, thank goodness he did. He did from a very early age wanted to be a comedy writer, and got to live, a dream come true, to say the least, and is still doing so. Very, very cool conversation that he and I had. This is going to be part one of two. Part one is going to go all the way and talks a lot about some of the things that he saw and experienced before actually becoming a writer. Part two is going to come out next week, and that's going to be Lee, talking about how life changed and what changed after becoming a writer. I will tell you this, I'm going to precurse this. I didn't get to everything I wanted to get to. Fortunately, he's going to come back on. Maybe we'll have him and Joe Grossman on one day and we'll talk about this stuff. But either way, the Letterman Podcast is proud to present Lee Ellenberg, part one. So when did you start working for The Tonight Show?
I started working for The Tonight Show October of 2020.
Of 2020, so it's only been a couple of years. And
it's been 2 years, yeah.
And you're there with your buddy Joe Grossman now. That's got to be kind of fun.
It's great, actually. There's a pretty decent representation of Letterman guys. One of the head writers is Paul Masella, who was a writer at Letterman, and Chris Belair.
Okay.
So, I mean, it's a much larger writing staff at The Tonight Show, but, it's nice to be able to work with some of my old buddies.
Oh, that's awesome.
And it's even greater working with this new bunch, it's a lot of fun.
We'll get to that. I do. There's a couple little things I want to ask you about The Tonight Show in a second here.
Sure.
Lee Ellenberg, I'm so happy that you're here now. Joe Grossman, or more accurately, through Joe Grossman, he has told us that his wife actually has said that you are the most well-adjusted, normal comedy writer that she's ever met. Is that something that you get a lot, or did you just hoodwink her?
Well, another friend of mine once said that the most abnormal thing about me is how normal I am. I don't know how true. I think I put on a good act. Like, I feel like Joe always kind of overstates my social gifts and understates his own. I don't think, I mean, if Joe was sitting here, he would shoot me a look, but I don't think Joe and I are that different. I really don't. I mean, I don't think I'd be as good friends with him if we weren't, So I don't think there's that big of a difference between us, to be honest. If there's one difference, I mean, if you put us in a room full of people, I'm probably I can negotiate that a little better than he. But I think we're all pretty well adjusted in our own way. I really don't think I'm that much different than the other writers I've met, to be honest with you.
I love this conversation. Like, talking with the writers is a unique part of this experience for me here, because the personalities are so eclectic, and Steve O'Donnell has talked about that a little bit, and that many writers collect things or have these little eccentricities. Steve Young went as so far as to say that the broken comedy writers mentality, when something is hilarious and you just go, yeah, that's funny.
That's true.
And it's comedy writers are such an interesting breed. They're fascinating to me in how they think and view the world and articulate those things. Did you always know you wanted to be a comedy writer? How did that manifest?
I always did. It never felt like a conscious decision for me, to be honest with you. Like I never had a moment. I mean, as a kid, you want to be a fireman, you want to be an astronaut.
Sure. Yeah.
I wanted to be Indiana Jones, but then
I wanted to be a Ghostbuster.
there you go.
Yeah.
And there's still time. But I think when getting a job was a thing that I knew I needed, this was what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
So yeah, I really don't even remember making the decision. And I will say, I can't begin to tell you how just it made college a much more stress-free time, because I saw a lot of kind of I'm sure you did too, like all this
Yeah.
indecision and worry around me, and I was spared that.
Oh, the kids who knew they were going to be a teacher, or they knew they were going to be a veterinarian or whatever, they were just like, oh yeah, straight path. These are
Yeah.
the classes I'm going to take. This is the end
Yep.
game, and it's there. It's the kids who were getting the BA of arts or something, like just the general study stuff, that were
Yeah.
still like, I'm not certain. So you
I
tailor made your college experience to become a comedy writer.
Well, yeah, I went to Binghamton, and there was no communications program when I was there.
Okay.
So, my friend, two of my friends had a radio show, so I kind of hung around with them and did that. But I really did nothing during college to help further this goal. I should have. That was a big mistake of mine. I should have gotten internships and all that stuff. I didn't do it. But college, like I'm trying to, if my parents watch this, I want to say this diplomatically. I knew college would do absolutely nothing for my career.
Okay.
I just knew I needed to graduate college, and I wanted them to feel good that I hadn't wasted their money. So I thought, well, if I can although to my parents' credit, they always said, if it's a choice between getting an A and being miserable and getting a B and having a blast, go have a blast.
Oh,
So
that's fantastic.
I got a B and had a blast.
Oh, that's great.
But it's so, I still remember, in a way, it's kind of haunts me in a way. I remember towards the end of my senior year, I was in this class, because I was in the business school, I should say, for no reason. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I figured if it was my dad's advice, he said, look, until you get the job, maybe a business degree could help. So that's what I did. And I remember
there's some common sense there.
Absolutely. And I remember being in this class. It was a human resources class. It was about 350 people. And this is towards the end of senior year, when, a lot of the students started getting job offers, and and feel free to edit this out if this is boring, by the way.
Not at all.
And I so distinctly remember, because this is now when a bunch of people I knew had already accepted job offers, and one guy raised his hand and said to the professor, I was offered a job, I accepted the job in an accounting firm. It's it was like a lot of money coming out of college.
Sure.
And he said, the thing is, I don't love accounting. And I'll never forget, the professor took a beat, stared him right in the eye, and said, my prediction is in 5 years, you won't be an accountant. And I can't begin to tell you just the hush that came over this room, because everyone was in the same kind of boat, because they just thought, oh my God, did I just make this mistake? Did I waste my 4 years? And I have to say that, I just felt, even though they were going to be making so much money, more money than I would, I just felt so grateful that I was being spared that I didn't have that doubt. And I saw it in the kid's face. It's, and I felt bad for him, because he had worked so hard for this goal, but in a way he was kind of heartbroken. And I just thought, it might be a struggle. I might go long stretches of my career without jobs. Yep. But, at least I won't have that. And, that I always think about that.
So Lee, I you and I don't know each other all that well when it comes to the podcasting chops that I have were developed because I actually host a men's mental wellness podcast. My wife is building a men's mental wellness app called He Changed It. Her and her team are brilliant, and I'm just this dummy watching in the background, but I can talk, and I am interested and curious and whatnot. So and of course my David Letterman adoration from forever. I'm the opposite of you in that regard, and it's so funny that there are so many guys out there, and this is a topic of the podcast constantly. Middle-aged men right now, many of them are having a crisis of purpose. They connected the dots they were supposed to connect. Your parents were great in the sense that says, don't get the A, go have the B and have a blast. A lot of other dudes went through life where it was like, no, you follow this path, get the good job with the good benefits, get the house, get the family, all that kind of stuff. And they're there in their 40s and 50s now going, okay, well, I did everything I was supposed to do, but they're not scratching that purpose itch. And there's this crisis in that. The fact that in your early 20s, you were able to see that crossroad, recognize it, and take, I'm not being hyperbolous in saying the path of the narrow path. Most people would take the money and go for the job and think that that's going to bring them happiness, when no, you want to fulfill what's inside you.
But it's not a function of my being so wise. It was more that I knew what I wanted to do. Like I said, I didn't feel like the decision had been made for me. So I felt like this was sort of just like a benefit of that. I mean, there's certainly a lot of downsides to it, but
there's struggle.
Yeah, but like I have at my age now, I came to realize that it's the question is always, well, what do you want to do when young people start thinking about their careers? Whereas now I feel like the question you should really ask yourself is, how do you want to feel? Like, in other words, do you want to feel like I won't have to worry about, feeding myself or putting a roof over my head or, like that. I just know I'll always be able to pay my bills. Or do you want to feel like, every day I go to a job where I'm met with these set of challenges, and not only do I believe I have the skill set to meet these challenges, but find it fulfilling to meet these challenges.
Yes.
And I feel like and I know plenty of people who say, you know what, I'd much rather pay my bills and,
they need that security.
And just learn the banjo on Saturday and I can scratch that itch there. Which is fine. But I think that's, and again, there's a lot of downsides to this. Unless you're one of those fortunate few who can merge the two and which most of us, let's be honest, can't. I just felt like I knew that if I had chosen that other path, I would forever be questioning myself. So, that was very important to me.
It's so cool getting this stuff out of the way, kind of learning about your mindset then versus now and all these things as we're setting a beautiful table here. Where did you grow up?
Brooklyn.
Which
is why
you're
I
a New
look
York
and
boy.
so tough.
Oh man.
Yes.
And I mean, okay, of all of Letterman, at the end of the day, a international institution that, kids from Western Canada absolutely fell in love with whatever. Yeah. But at the end of the day, a New York guy, a New York institution, it was a New York show. Did you gravitate to it immediately?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, I don't remember the morning show at all.
Yeah.
I remember actually we were on a family trip and my brother and mother were watching and they were in the other room laughing. And I so distinctly remember this and asking them, what they were watching. And they were saying, there's a new guy. He's got a late night show. It's on after Carson, David Letterman. And so, because they watched it, well, I wanted to be a part of it. And then, you kind of like, I eased my way into it. And then by the time I was probably about 13 or so, like Dave had been on NBC at the late night show a few years, then I just became hooked and I just started watching it every night. And then I remember how big a deal it was when he went from 4 nights a week to 5 nights a week, because now I didn't have to wait.
No more Friday night videos for you, sir.
Friday night videos, exactly right. And it was, like, wow, I could watch Letterman once a week, every week. It was such a huge thing for me. And I also liked that it was Friday because that was viewer mail night. And I always like viewer mail because I used to like the pre-tapes when they showed the offices. And I always liked that little peek into the, inner sanctum. But so yeah, so I would say, and I remember that was also the age when, you stay out a little later, maybe, you sleep over at a friend's house, and Letterman just became a staple of that. So that's from a very young age that became my thing. And it was such a perfect age to be exposed to it because, as you well know, like at 12:30, it was just this weird, odd thing. You
Yep.
felt like
Different energy that hour.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I think Dave used to joke that it was only watched by prisoners and shut-ins. But it did feel like you were just stumbled upon this kind of public access show that no one else knew about.
Yep.
The studio was sort of like purposely, not very ornate. I used to love when he came through, though, when he was introduced and he came through, you saw the exit sign. Like
Yeah.
it just looked like they put a desk and some audience chairs just in the middle of this abandoned office building.
Almost industrial like. Yeah.
Absolutely.
With
So
those double doors, the
about
industrial double doors that absolutely.
And also, it very much spoke to me comedically. Not that I knew what irony was or this and that. It was just so different from Carson, and as a young guy, that really appealed to me. So I was hooked very, very young, and that just kept growing as I got older.
I love being able to relate to you guys. So I became a financial advisor, and one of my first clients was my best friend's parents growing up. They were in my office 3 days ago at the time of this recording here. 3 days ago, they were in my office, and we were just going through stuff and talking about memories. And I always do all these little side projects. I'm kind of known in my city as a financial advisor or whatever, but I do these little side projects. To scratch the itch, as you talked about it.
Yeah.
And so he said, I had been a few months or whatever since I hadn't seen him since I started this podcast. And then he looked and said, "So you're hosting a David Letterman podcast." And we bonded over the fact that their house was my favorite house to sleep over at, because as kids, we were carte blanche at any time. That they didn't care when we went to bed. They didn't care about, the food that we ate and all that kind of stuff. And one of the foundational things at like 7, 8 years old, sleeping over at my buddy's house, was we stayed up and we watched Letterman. That was our thing, because we couldn't normally do it. And the Friday night,
that was like with me.
That's exactly it. And so as you're saying that, as you're retelling this, I'm getting goosebumps up and down. And this is something that's very relatable. There's a generation of us that all kind of feel this way. And then also the fact that so many of these staff members became cast members and became, beloved characters to us. Who were some of your favorites growing up? Are there any favorite memories or moments of late night that you had that you kind of lock in the chamber of your nostalgic?
It's probably the usual cast of characters. Chris Elliott, obviously, who I fortunately became good friends with, which was a treat. And Gerard Mulligan, who I also loved, who I also became good friends with. And
so
obviously the bits, the best Chris and Jerry did together. I used to love Biff, obviously. I used to love Al Marr. I'm trying to think back to, because my mind still goes back to CBS. But those were probably, who am I forgetting? It was Biff, Al Marr. I used to like when they went into the control room with Hal Gurney.
Me too.
And I'm trying to think. I remember Chris being the big one, though.
Oh,
he was just so funny.
I remember when I saw him on Saturday Night Live for the first time. I was like, "Oh my god!" It blew my little mind seeing him on Saturday Night Live, because oh my god, that Chris Elliott's like somebody discovered him, and I mean, I was so naive at the time. I didn't realize how it worked, but it was like, it was amazing seeing him and seeing some of these people do some of these side projects and things. Chris Elliott was a big one. I would love to have him on the show.
He's also, I mean, his career, I mean, apart from, he started as an intern. And then to graduate to, a pretty prominent role on the show. And then, he did his FDR show, his one man show, which is brilliant. It's on YouTube if anybody wants to watch it, and then to parlay that into a successful movie career. I
Yep.
mean, I was talking about this with Joe. That I'm not only talking about Groundhog Day, but he was in Manhunter. He was in The Abyss,
Yeah.
and it's and the other thing I have to say, it was such a treat meeting them and becoming friends with them in real life, because using Gerard and Chris as two prime examples is I can't even begin to tell you how funny and smart they are in real life. They are just, very impressive people. That was also a real big treat. But those were the guys. And I still remember, so when I got to CBS, the first time, it's so funny because I know him so well, but the first time I saw Jerry Mulligan in person, it was like seeing a New York Yankee. I couldn't believe it.
Totally.
And, it was just like one of those faces from my childhood.
Yeah.
It was really, it was thrilling. But that show was fantastic.
You're preaching to the choir. A couple of weeks ago, I was in New York, and luckily, just happenstance, I happened to meet Barbara Gaines, and when I met her, I don't normally get starstruck. I'm pretty unshakable when it comes to this stuff, and I've met many of my heroes and all of that stuff. But with Barbara, I lost it a little bit. Like I was shaking a little bit when I met her, and I even said to Walter afterwards. I remarked to him. I said, "I hope she doesn't think I'm too freakish, because
she's used to it."
Well, I imagine so. And then, this part here is something that I'm kind of using as a moniker now, as I'm sort of trying to force my way into the Pants family. Just before they left, I thanked her for something, and I said, just thank you so much for everything that you've done, and I'm so grateful for how you've connected, the pathways in my gray matter. And she looked at me and she goes, "We're all nuts, And I looked at her and she goes, "We're just nuts, and we gravitated towards each other, and we were all just kind of nuts." And it's the same kind of nuts. And I think that same kind of nuts is a lot bigger. I think there's a lot of us that related to that sensibility, that let's not take life too seriously, and there was a mood and an attitude that was there that seems to be every single pantser that I talk to seems to have a lot of these very similar attributes.
Yeah.
You started there in 2000, right?
As a writer on 2000, but I was a page back in 94.
You were so this part I didn't know. You were a page at the insanity time, like just when you were one of those
my first day,
the happy audience greeters and people like that. Like you were that guy at the Ed Sullivan Theater.
I was happy greeter guy. Yep.
Wow.
I think my class of pages, who are still my friends to this day, we began, I believe it was the very day of the first anniversary at CBS.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, you saw. Okay, that I didn't realize that part of it. Is that directly from college to that job?
No, I did apply to be a page at CBS. I didn't hear anything. Then I did 2 internships after college, which is unusual. Then I was a PA. Then I was a production assistant, and then I was out of work for 8 months. And I applied for the page program again, and this time I got it. So it was a year after I graduated college, almost to the not to the day. It was a year. It was August, so it was like 15 months after I graduated college that I became.
And you're a
CBS
PA on the
page.
Late Show with David Letterman.
I'm sorry, what?
A year later, you're a PA on the Late Show with David Letterman.
No, I wasn't a PA. I became a page.
Or sorry, you're a page at that point. Okay.
Yeah, I was a page, and in August of '94 we began.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of time. Like when you look at it like that, graduated within a couple of years, I'm doing the dream job, Conan.
Oh yeah.
Conan famously, he leaves college and he's like, well, I've got 2 jobs that I would like: a writer on SNL or a writer on Late Show or Late Night with David Letterman at the time. Like you got a chance to kind of just get plugged essentially right into the system that would lead to
It was crazy. It
wow.
was, because I, I knew I wanted to write for Dave at the time. There was a sense that, well, if you didn't go to Harvard and
Yep.
didn't write for the Lampoon, you weren't going to get in, which wasn't true. But I mean, I guess there was some degree of
No,
truth.
that perception is out there though, for sure. I
Yeah.
love
So
talking about this on this show. I love
yeah,
dispelling and saying what parts were true and what weren't. Like
right.
clearly the amount of writers that didn't go to Harvard, show that it's not an entire, the stereotype definitely doesn't, completely hold water, but there is some,
Right.
there's a lot of Harvard connection there though.
Oh, there certainly was, and I knew quite a few of them. But I just felt, well, I'm never getting into the front door. So I thought, well, how could I get my, literally my foot in the door? So I said, I'll become a page. And like I said, it took well over a year for that to happen.
Yep.
But even so, I was thrilled. I mean, I remember our first day because we're learning how to seat the audience. So
Right.
the day we had like this orientation at the Ed Sullivan Theater, and they just bring us in, and it's like the first time you see Yankee Stadium, and
Yeah.
I really, this sounds hyperbolic, but it's not. There was no place else I wanted to be when those doors opened. I didn't care that I'd be showing people to the restrooms.
Yep.
I just couldn't believe it. And the next thing I remember, we're sitting in the front row, we're being taught about, seating procedures, and 20 feet away is Dave's desk. And it was a remarkable moment. It really was. So that was August of 94.
Wow.
Yeah.
Now that being said, you being that role, where were you during when the show was actually taping? Were you in the auditorium? Were you just outside still at your post? Where was it a variety of places and you kind of stations and you grew?
That's it. I think there were 14 pages that worked late show every night, and depending, and they were lettered, ABC, so on. And depending
was that a
what your
promotional
letter
thing? Like when A left, did someone else become the new A? Was it kind of like a Men in
No,
Black kind of thing?
It really was more, if you were, let's say, I don't remember all of them, but if you're like A and B, you're at the first part during the seating, you are the ticket takers. And
so
then
these are
during
sections,
the show,
essentially. They're posts.
yes.
Okay, I gotcha.
Right. And then during the show, you stand here, you stand here. So, and we had pages, surrounding the perimeter, on the bottom, in the balcony. And then there was two pages outside, one just outside the double doors, and then there was one called the control room page, which was funny because you're literally staring at the control room door. It's control, that was control room D. But so it depends what station, what letter you were assigned for that day.
Gotcha.
And then
it rotated though.
It rotated, but most of the time you were inside the audience.
Okay, right now,
Yeah,
already,
you were inside, yeah.
Lee, right now, I'm going to say I would like you to come back, please, because there's so much meat on this bone that I can't even, I can't even, like the amount of, the tonnage of questions I have. Now, I got to ask though, as a page, you would have seen some of the crazy moments that happened of certain people storming out, or some of the different things in the audience, pre-tapes that might have been filmed in the audience, Alec Baldwin in the audience, drinking with, I can't even, I have so many that are going through that my mind is spinning. A couple that just come right to the front of your brain, a couple moments that you got to witness as a page in the show. Like you must have been focused on the show as a fan, simultaneously trying to do your job. I mean, I can't imagine you wouldn't have been. Like, holy shit, you got to see this show every night. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, I mean, well, because we were pages, and so pages didn't have to report to the Letterman show until 3, unless there was one position where you had to report at 2, which means we really didn't get to see a lot of the stuff that they produced before the show. And we were outside from 3 to 4. Now there were occasionally they would shoot stuff, very rarely, like outside. I remember they shot one thing under the marquee, but by the time we got there, the show, I wouldn't say it was locked, but a lot of it had been done. That's not to say we didn't see a ton of stuff, but I think the things you're referring to, we got to see more. I got to see more of when I was actually a staffer on the show.
Okay.
Because we were so focused, like from 3 to 4:15 of then loading the audience, and then you go to your stations. That being said, in a way that almost made it more fun because you're still trying to just like sneak a glance, and it's like,
Yeah.
there's Jerry,
The mystique is still there.
oh, absolutely. I
Yeah.
remember, I'm trying to think when it was. How did I see this? At some point, oh, that was rehearsal. That's what I'm thinking about when I was a staffer on the show. But yeah, the mystique very much was still there. I mean, we didn't really have a ton of face-to-face with anybody from the show, with the exception of the audience department. So, but so then at the end of the day, we'd always talk about little glimpses of people we saw, or a snippet of this, or so on and so forth. So, it was great because we were all such fans of the show. But we only got like a slight peek behind the curtain.
I feel you. I'm thinking more of the moments like Chris Farley spontaneously gets up and starts running around all of the audience, like little moments like that. Those must have been really special when things like that would happen, and like because it's something that breaks out of the ordinary a little bit. It's that spontaneous nature of the show that we love so much.
Well, the first thing to keep in mind, and I know I'm going off on a different track for a minute, but
wherever you like,
the one thing that was special about The Late Show was it was in a Broadway theater. It wasn't in a studio.
Yes.
And I remember, so my first day as a page was also my first day as an audience member, because I didn't know what unfolded.
Yep.
And I have to say, the first time I did it, it was thrilling. Not only because it was my first time there, but because I felt they did such a good job of making it seem like you're not just watching a taping of a show, you're seeing a show.
Yes.
So the audience comes in, and for anyone who had never seen the show, you come in as soon as the 461st person was sat. The lights went down.
Yep.
Bill Sheft at the time came out, and he introduced a video piece.
Yep.
And so then you see like a 4 or 5 minute, it was David Taco Bell, and people loving. Okay. Then the lights come on. Bill comes on and does a warm up. And Bill was the best warm up guy I'd ever seen. He was such a pro. They were like every 5 seconds was a solid laugh line. It was just great. He brought such an energy to it. And I mean, the people there, especially back in '94, they were just so happy to be there.
Yes.
Then he introduced the band. Then the band would come out, and they would play a song. And then towards the tail end of the song, Paul would come out. Then they'd go crazy again.
Yep.
Then they would do another song. Then Dave would come out and do a little intro, some Q&A.
Yep.
So by the time the show started taping, the audience has already seen about a half hour has had about a half
that
hour
energy
of entertainment.
is up here.
It was tremendous. And again, I mean, I was fortunate enough to see SNL twice, and I loved it. I love SNL. I love going there. But there's no question it's different when you're seeing something in a television studio as opposed to a Broadway theater.
Without a doubt.
I mean, it's a beautiful theater. The doors close, and you're in a theater on Broadway. And it was just so nice how they put together this whole little show. And I remember the first time seeing it, these people, the audience members, they've seen an hour and 30 minutes, and it's such a different experience than just going to see, whether it's any show really that's in a studio. They're still fun, but this was different, and
it's unique.
It really was unique. So that was thrilling to see for the first time.
We've talked about the elements of this, and folks in the Letterman community who have been on this podcast, because we want to really include the enthusiast community out there as well, because of just the nature of Letterman was different. Breaking the fourth wall allowing the audience to kind of be part of the show, whether it's a viewer mail
Yes.
segment, whether it's the cast members coming in, like, you know, the deconstruction of the talk show part.
Yeah.
I thought when developing this show, it was a very important that we had members of the community who love this as well also be guests and to be able to talk about their memories and things like that. And I'll tell you, every single person I've talked to who has seen that show live, especially, you know, in the Ed Sullivan Theater, when you walk in, it literally assaults you. Like you said, Yankee Stadium, you know, but the energy that happens, like Paul and the band playing through entire songs, playing through the entire commercial break. It's not just a bumper that starts and stops. It's a party the entire time. You guys were, I mean, first rate at, no, we're live. Like, you treated it like it was live. And very few, you know, it was really tight. And even when there was a mess up of some sort, you know, you, as the audience, you didn't even really know it for the most part. I'm sure there are notable exceptions, but you know, Dave just said, "Oh, what? Okay, no, we'll just take it from here." Okay, and unless you were really, really paying attention, you didn't even see it.
I mean,
the energy just stayed up there. I think that because of that, you were able to keep that energy as high as possible for the entire show.
Yeah, I mean, that's also owes to how good our production staff was, our director, our associate directors, everything. That, you know, we were an hour show, but, well, let's say, I mean, people like
42
Barbara
minutes or whatever it is,
and Nancy, could speak to this better than I. But, you know, 42 minutes. But, you know, and we used to play through the commercials, so it was meaning that if it was like a 3-minute commercial break, there would be a 3-minute break. Live. So it really was an hour. So it wasn't like it took 2 hours to tape the show. I mean, I used to speak to the editors, and they would, you know, a bad night for them. And again, speaking someone on more of the production side probably knows a lot more than I do. But, you know, they would
throw them my way,
eyes
please. We want to talk to them too.
Yeah, they would say, "Oh, you know, we're 8 minutes over," which is a lot for them because you do have to find 8 minutes. But, you know, Dave was so good at what he did that, you know, by the time we were done, we had taped an hour show. When I was a page working in the broadcast center, the pages were once asked to work a show on Saturday. It was a new, like, local talk show. I think it was local. The guy had never done anything before. The first day, it was an hour show. It took 3 hours.
Oh my gosh.
And, you know, it's not as easy as it looks.
I was going to say there's a getting covered with getting sprayed with a you know, ice cold water for you guys. Oh, what we see is tight as a drum. What else is out there? Holy smokes.
Absolutely. It was this incredible moment. And then you watch the Letterman show and, you know, I mean, look, once I worked there, you know, everyone's complaining. It's like, oh, why don't we do this? And
it's a normal workspace.
But it was really an incredibly well-produced show. And then you have, you know, the greatest broadcaster of all time leading the charge. And, you know, so on the one hand, it really is emblematic of just how good of a show it was, but also it made it so much nicer for the audience. Nobody was itching to get out of there. Whereas, and seeing that one show really was, especially because I was so young, really was a wake-up call that, oh, I see. They're very good at what they do over there. That was really interesting. I'll never forget that. But I think that was it was just a very well put together not performance, just this exhibition.
The entire operation was tight as a drum.
It really was. It was really impressive to me.
Well,
to behold.
That's why this show exists. We talk about this. David Letterman, the greatest broadcaster of all time. Total agreement by far. You know, I've said this, he is my Walter Cronkite. There's a lot of other Gen Xers that feel the exact same way. You know, for various reasons. Gen X is a different generation. And you know, it wasn't just a newsman. You know, we were apathetic and didn't trust a lot of that stuff. And Dave, I thought, was just that's why I say he is my Walter Cronkite. You know, he just is. But also, and this show is about David Letterman and Company, because the greatest broadcaster of all time, in my opinion, also had the greatest company of support of all time, and you match those two together, and you have what you guys had. So
Yeah,
that's
it
why
was a
we
great
exist as a show.
staff.
Yeah, to celebrate
Yeah,
that.
I mean, it really was a great staff. I mean, I just think back to those years so fondly. And I mean, I'm now on my third late night show, and look, I can't speak highly enough of everybody I've worked with.
Yeah.
I really can't. I mean, it's not easy putting on these shows, but you know, I was with that show for 20 years. That's my family, and you know, my appreciation for what they've done, and has only grown.
Yeah.
They're really just a tremendous bunch of people. Everybody, you
Yeah.
know, like the editors were great. Our graphic artists were great. Our set designers, costume designers, our directors, ads, the crew. You know, I mean, it was really the production staff. I mean, you know, you know, Walter. I mean, Walter's
Yep.
wife Nancy. I mean,
Yep.
you're not going to find somebody better in this business than Nancy. And it really, and Barbara. I mean, I'm Barbara's biggest fan. I love Barbara. But it really was. It was a special time. It is. I'm very. You know, it's funny. I was there so long. I remember like leaving and thinking, could you be nostalgic for something that was such a big part of your life? I don't know if that makes sense.
It does.
It always seemed to me that, you know, you're nostalgic for college because it was like a snapshot in time,
Yeah.
or this weekend. But, you know, can you be nostalgic for 2 decades? But
Yeah.
turns out you can.
Presently in the moment nostalgic. And I mean, there is no greater gratefulness than being able to be present and knowing that you're living those nostalgic moments, to realize that the video camera of life is actually on. And these are the moments that you're going to think back to. What a gift to be able to be present and to know that at the moment it's happening. That is a very cool thing.
Yes, sometimes I wasn't always present. I mean, sometimes
Sure. Oh, no, of course.
you know, you want to, but you know, we always knew how fortunate we were. We always really. I mean, first of all, nobody gets one job in TV that lasts that long. That's just not how TV works.
Yeah.
But also to do it in a place where everyone got along so well, and it was just like I don't know. It was just we were all very, very fortunate. I mean, I remember not long after the show ended, we had a reunion, and there must have been 60 people there. You know, it's we just couldn't wait to see each other again. So I feel you know, I don't want to be too sappy about it, but like, you know, while I was there, I felt so fortunate to be able to work for this person for whom I had so much respect. But now I feel fortunate to be able to have worked with those people.
Oh man. Okay, so I'm gonna bookend this part, but just to let I could sit here with Lee and we could do an entire episode on Tales from the Page program. We could do that. I'm doing my very best. I'm gonna try and get David K on here as well, because I love the science of the audience and all of that stuff, how that was systemized and expertly executed. All sorts of little details that the public would never know, that were, you know, for lack of a better term, scientific. You and I could talk about this stuff here, but you were a writer on the show from 2000 to 2015. Like, we got to get to that. Now, when you're a Page, though, and I think I've got a bridge here, you know, we've talked to so many people who talk about the collaboration, the level of collaboration in the show, and how there was a place almost for everybody to submit a top 10 joke, or to get to get your foot in the door, to enter the writing aspect or the creative aspect of the show. Did that happen for you very much when you were a Page? Let's build the bridge of how you went from one to you know, the entry level to the purpose-filled role that you got.
Well, when I just wanted again to get my foot in the door. So when I was a Page, and then I actually got hired, which was, you know, in many ways a bigger step or a bigger moment in my life than I became a writer in an odd way. But I didn't know what the path was.
Okay.
Like I didn't know that. I didn't know the writers. I only knew really other, you know, people just out of college. And again, I was still operating under the assumption that, well, you know, everyone went to Harvard. And I think at that point, again, there were a fair amount. So I really had no path. My feeling was, I'm just going to try to keep moving forward however I can. So, and then I was, like I said, I was fortunate enough to get hired at the show. At that time, the audience was run by a woman named Janice Panino, who hired me. And to this day, I mean, I feel like I owe Janice my life, someone who also I'm still friends with. And again, I still didn't quite know what the next step was. Then I moved up to, okay, so now here's where I started. Now that I'm in the door, I'm starting to hear little things here and there. And around this time, I had heard that a writer's assistant, was it that? No, first I went up to, I became the receptionist on the production floor.
Oh, man.
I answered phones for Barbara and Rob and Dave and everyone, or Dave's assistant.
This would be the job that Art Kelly took after you?
Correct.
Wow.
No, there were, Bob Borden had it after me.
Oh, yeah.
And there might have been someone else. But so I did that. And to be honest with you, when that job opened, I wasn't even sure I should go for it, because my feeling was I want to be on 14. Like, I want to be with the writers. I don't want to be with the producers. Not that I didn't want to be with them, but
no,
you know,
I get it.
Like with TV, it's like, it's one of these things where I feel like you have to be careful what you get good at. And, you know, like being not that I was good at anything. I'm not sure I'm good at anything now, but I just didn't know that I wanted to, you know what? I always overthink things. I was answering the phones, but but I thought, you know, I started to learn that on the writer's floor, there was a receptionist and then a writer's assistant. And I started to learn that they would be promoted and move to the next step. So I thought, like, I got to get in line there. So I think that was my fear about going to 12. But I was on 12 and I loved it. Everyone was so nice to me, and it was great. When you're working in the audience department, you're on the 8th floor. You know, it was like the boiler room.
Yeah.
Where somebody used to call it the boiler room, which was apt just because you don't see as much. And then now I'm on 12, I'm meeting everyone, I'm seeing how things are done. And again, everyone was great. Then I finally was able to answer the phones on 14.
Okay.
That is when I started seeing the path, because the writer's assistant had just been promoted to writer.
Right.
The receptionist had just been promoted to writer's assistant.
Okay, there we go.
So now that I was in line, I thought, that's the path. I mean, I would later learn people had been doing this before, but I didn't know.
No.
So that was really the first time that I saw that's what I got to do. And, you know, so that's kind of what happened there. And that was the other thing. When I was on 12, I had been hearing that not only the writer's assistant, but the receptionist had been submitting jokes and getting them on the show.
I was
going to
go.
Thing that's that's the sort of thing that's frowned upon now by the guild. But I mean, we're talking 20 years ago. But that's how you got noticed.
Yeah.
So, you know, when I was on 12, I thought, oh my God, to get to the answer phones on 14, that would be tremendous. And when the job opened, you know, Rob called me into his office and we spoke, and he says, I think we can make this happen for you. And it was a really, you know, amazing moment for me.
So at that point, had you already submitted jokes and had you gotten anything on the air?
None, because
not once.
Because again, I thought, in fact, I think I don't think there were a ton of outside people submitting.
Right.
There might have been people. I don't even know how it works. I'm sure Steve or Bill could give a better look into this, but I don't think they were taking that many submissions, maybe for the monologue, but those are people who were contracted by the show.
Yeah.
This was a much more kind of ad hoc thing. But I only started hearing about the receptionist and writer's assistant submitting just through, you know, and I'll never forget. So Rob, you know, gave me the job, and, you know, they said, you'll start in like a week or so. We just have to fill your spot, which Bob ultimately took. And so I'm sitting there thinking, okay, I'll get up to 14, but I can't submit just yet. What I'll do is I have to treat this as not a part of the job, but a privilege. And I don't want to be too presumptuous. So what I'll do is
Interesting.
I'll wait a few months. And then I will go to the head writer, who was Tim Long at the time. And
Yeah.
I said, I will ask him, would you mind if I submitted? I said, I really, and I also wanted to be respectful in the process, to be honest with you. And I'm not
Yeah.
exaggerating when I tell you that day, a couple hours later, Tim was on the 12th floor. He was probably meeting with Dave or Rob, whatever. And he comes out to the reception area where I'm working, obviously. And, he unprodded, he just comes over to me and he says, I heard you're coming up to work on 14. We're so happy to have you. By the way, if you ever want to submit, feel free. That's what he says. I couldn't imagine a nicer, kinder, more generous, more welcome thing to hear, a thing to say, and such a welcoming thing to hear for a kid who's basically just scared out of his mind. And, again, I looked at the writers like they were
Imposter
the New York
syndrome like
Yankees.
crazy.
Yeah, and I just said, like, how am I going to ask that I could submit material along, the people on that floor? And for him to do that was such a kind, generous thing to do. And he was great to me. Everyone was nice to me, but it was, if you had asked me, what do you want someone to say to you at this moment, that would have been it. And he did. And so, like, I think by the second day, after I learned just like how things operated, because it was much different than the 12th floor, I started submitting jokes.
How is it much different from the 12th floor? What are some stark contrasts?
It's pretty much what you think. I mean, the 12th floor was the main floor. It looked like it was like this respectable office. It was very quiet. And, you had the producers, you had the showrunner, you had Dave. And then you go up to 14 and it was, a much more, it's what you would expect the writer's floor of the Letterman show to be like. It was
what I'm thinking right now is that episode of The Simpsons where Bart Simpson, they go to New York and Bart Simpson
Mad
Magazine, and he goes up there and the elevator door opens and there's just chaos going on and then the elevator door closes. Kind of like that.
It was kind of like that. It was just much more casual. And, on 12, again, everyone was very nice to me, but there was this protocol about how to do things, how to answer. I mean, I'm doing a job where, at one point, Dave's assistant says, this is what to do if Paul Newman calls. And Dave's not in it, so it's, it is kind of a heady experience. Or here's what to do when the head of the network calls.
Yeah, the gatekeeper aspect of that, obviously completely different on 14 than 12.
Absolutely. Well, and also, I mean, I will say in all fairness, on 12, everyone pretty much answered their own phones. But, you still have to know what to do in case. But on 14, everyone grabs their own phone. And, if it was just, and you did feel like, even though I didn't see them as my contemporaries, because they weren't, but, because they were younger, closer in age to me, it did seem like, no one's going to yell at me for, I don't know. Well, again, no one yelled at me on 12, but it just felt like there was more margin of error, even though my fear of screwing up had increased exponentially because now I was with the writing staff. It was a much more relaxed vibe up there.
I love this. You always knew you wanted to be a comedy writer. That was always there. And now you're at the precipice. I got to ask you, do you remember the very first thing you ever got on the air?
I do. Well, I do and I don't. I don't remember the actual joke, but I do remember it was a top 10 joke. And the subject line was about the woman in New York who gave birth at the age of 63, who just through a crazy twist of fate, I wound up meeting her daughter years later. But
my gosh.
That was the topic. And I don't remember the joke. And I usually remember these things, but I don't remember it. But that
we'll do a little digging, just so you know. I'll ask Dawn if he can do some digging on it.
Joke. It was a terrible joke, but you
you got it on.
I mean, the words came out of Dave's mouth. It was incredible. It really
And
was.
did you know beforehand, or did you see it in the broadcast?
No, I would, because again, I'm the receptionist. No one tells me anything, nor should they. I mean, my job is to answer the phones. So, and it's so funny to think back because I didn't even have a computer. But I used to write the jokes on a legal pad. Then I would run down to the ticket office, borrow their computer, and then I would get yelled at because I'm using their computers precious. When I shouldn't be. Yeah, and then I wound up stealing a computer. I know you didn't ask this, but now just to think back to it, there was a closet of all the old computers, like the dated, broken machines.
Sure.
And one day, I said, well, no one's using them. So I took one, put it on my desk. This is just when the internet was becoming a thing. So just to show you how old I am.
Yep.
And the funny thing is, I didn't have a printer. So, and I remember, God bless her, Nancy, I don't know if she remembers this, she helped me. She said, what you do is you could print it, send it to the production printer down on 12. So I would write it on this computer I just stole out of a closet. I would send it to the printer Nancy used, and I would go to Nancy's office, and that's where I would get the paper that I could submit it. It just is funny to think, now it would be much different, but and that's how I would submit the thing. But yeah, that was
the first top 10, and there's many folks who that's their first thing they ever got, or the only thing they ever got. It was a top 10. I love the idea of collaboration, that people could throw in ideas for the top 10 lists from all over the place. You're a writer's assistant. Guys like Jerry have been on the show, and they've talked about times where during the show the writers would have to be kind of on call just in case a new top 10 list was necessary, or they needed to do something kind of on the fly. When that call happened, were you the guy that picked up the phone for that and helped to execute and deliver that, or did that go to kind of like the head writer from the floor? Hey guys, let's go and do this.
Yeah, I was pretty much out of the loop.
Okay.
That was like, by the time, if that ever happened when I was a receptionist, the head writer probably just called the conference room, because the writers would have dinner during the show.
Right.
So they'd probably, and they'd watch together.
Dinner that you probably ordered, by the way.
Did I order? I think I probably, I think that was a thing with no, actually I think the interns did that, to be honest with you.
That makes sense.
I did my share of coffee making. That was my big responsibility. I had to make that on 12 too. I made the coffee and did this, and anything they needed to get done. Yeah, like, to be honest with you, the receptionist job on 14, there wasn't a ton to do, because they answered their own phones, and if the head writer had something, he used to call the writer directly. So I really don't remember ever being the choke point in this crisis or something. It was, I was very much just there. But still, I finally felt like I started getting to know the writers, so I did feel like I was more in the mix, and then I'd start watching the show with them, then I would have dinner with them. So yeah, but I really could not have been any more useless as a receptionist on 14. I did nothing really to make anyone's job easier.
All the more time to be a sponge. If my math is correct, you do that for 1.5 years, 2 years as the assistant, and then you're promoted?
No, I actually became the writer's assistant for 2 years.
Okay.
Yeah, Rodney Rothman had taken over head writer, and then I was basically Rodney's assistant for 2 years.
Yeah. By the way,
and then,
a lot of folks who could have comic book character names who worked for you guys. Rod Rothman might be the, a Marvel character.
It's a superhero alias. Yeah.
Right.
And then it's funny you mentioned it in that clip of Chris Farley running through the audience, when he goes to the audience member and they kind of push each other, and then he picks them up and throws them in the dumpster. That's Rodney Rothman.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, you knew that? Okay.
Well, yeah, they did. I think they did has it come out yet? I think there's a staff favorite moments that might
Oh, I didn't see
include
that.
that clip. Maybe I might.
Okay.
I watch a lot of Letterman stuff. It might be in a Giller
Yeah.
clip somewhere, but
Oh,
anyway,
okay.
yeah. But I'm fascinated by all of this. We've kind of set the table to you becoming a writer. Now it's like,
Mm.
okay, talking about welcome to the show. Okay, we're gonna end it right there. As you can tell, I just love that conversation. I love all the conversations with these dynamic, eclectic people, especially because they have no idea they're dynamic nor eclectic, but they all are, every single one of them. Lee is just a fantastic guy. Just a quick note. Yeah, Rod Rothman's staff favorite moments is indeed on the official channel. You can go check it out right now. It was put out mid-October, I believe. And that Chris Farley clip is in there as well, so you can go and relive that. In the next part, we've got other episodes that we can relive, of course, lots of moments, lots of things like that happened to Lee after he became a writer. And so much meat on these bones with these people. And I just love the fact that once we get the intro out of the way, we can then move to the next phase and start talking about other moments now that we kind of know each other and move from there. We've done that already with Steve Weiner, and I just look forward to all of those. Steve Young, we've done that with as well. I mean, the mind on these people, fantastic. The reverence that they have for each other, and I'm just so grateful to be a part of this. Let's see. The business before we finish this episode of the Letterman podcast. Of course, we are brought to you by Rupert G and the Hello Deli. If you want to get shirts or mugs or other Late Show with David Letterman merchandise, go to hello-deli.com. If you're in the New York area, go visit the Hello Deli while it's still around and doing its thing. Let's give Rupert so much love for all of the entertainment that he has given us over the years. Please like, share, subscribe to this podcast, whatever platform you're consuming it on. We're doing very, very well on the YouTubes and things like that, and all the other things. We just would love to get those metrics up a little bit. I cannot wait until I don't have to ask for that anymore. That's going to be a lot of fun. I believe that's everything for today. We just shot our Christmas episode. We've got a very special treat, part of our Christmas episode that's coming out. And I'll give you a little tidbit. It's the first time we ever had to get a clearance on something. There's a piece of footage that we're going to be inserting into our Christmas episode that we had to get permission from up on high to show it in our episode, and they gave it to us. So very happy about that. That's a little bit of a tease. Maybe you don't care about stuff like that, but it certainly takes this enthusiast of David Letterman and makes his day. My name is Mike Chisholm. This has been the Letterman podcast with Mike Chisholm. I am so grateful for all of the support and all of the comments that we have gotten so far. Thank you very, very much for supporting the show. We will see you next time. Until then, thank you and good night.
Overcoat and underpants.